Hello and welcome to On Air with Owen. Me, Owen Richards, founder and CEO of Air Marketing, your go-to for outsourced B2B sales and marketing, and my new co-host, fellow business owner and great friend, Neil Finnie.
Hey everyone, Neil Finnie here, founder of the Generator Work Hub, a co-working space here in the beautiful Exeter, and also Next Gen Careers, a professional development program nurturing the talents of tomorrow.
Each week, we'll be diving into the everyday truths around running your own business. And trust me, we're not sugarcoating anything. It's all about the highs, the lows, and everything between when you run your own business as a founder.
Expect candid conversations and valuable insights between the two of us. Plus, we'll be joined by some special guests along the way.
So, time to sit back and tune in to this week's honest conversation. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of On Air with me, Owen Richards, and my co-host, Mr. Neil Finnie. How are you, Neil?
Putting a brave face on. Turning up just for you. I'm a bit sick. You might be able to hear I'm quite nasal at the moment. I've got sickness, and I don't get sick. And in the last month, every time I've just got back from Barcelona. Every time I've gone to Barcelona for programs, I come back and I've got blocked nose, bad sinuses, just feel a bit achy. I'm sure it's the flight. I'm sure that the cabin air that I'm breathing and the fact that our American students love -4 in the air conditioning plays havoc with me. But I thought, today, haven't had a catch up with you since last week. So, and I'm not going to miss these. Love them.
Oh, you are what a as I said, what a guy. What a guy. Absolutely. Well, I'm glad you're with us. I'm really glad you're with us, and I won't be offended if you need to pull the pin because you're really ill. But the reality is, you sat up straight. Your eyes are open. We might get some sense out of you. Who knows?
Just like I had a meeting earlier this morning, and my colleagues like, God, your face really looks like you've got the cold. So I think my eyes are quite small. I was like, oh, that's kind of you. Liz was.
I wouldn't have known differently. I wouldn't have known, mate. I wouldn't have known.
I look this bad all the time. Is that what you're saying?
That's all I can say. Is I would rather people listen to this than watch it. Let's go there.
yeah, quite possibly.
Oh dear. Well, it's good to have you here, mate. Do you know it's interesting? You talk about that sickness, and we're talking about running your own business and launching and growing your own business. I think it was last week or the week before, one of the previous episodes, we were talking about the unforeseen, and we were talking about how it can get in the way. I'd always remember when I started Air, and in the very first week that we had employees, I came down with some kind of sickness bug. I don't know if it was a bug or food or something. And I had a 2-day period where nobody knew what they were doing. They were 2-3 days into the job. There was no one else. And I was running off to the toilet and you're being sick and all the rest. You just think, God, I think back to those days, and it wasn't possible to take a day off. You just had to work with what you had to work with, and it is rough because you can't always just stand back and go, "Oh, let somebody else do it." If you're running a business, how do you navigate stuff like getting ill? Can't plan for it.
No, you can't plan for it. I think I don't know. Again, touching wood here. I'm super lucky. I have quite a strong constitution. I can. Tend to get on with things, even if I'm feeling a bit under the weather. I don't get too sick. But as you say, like as a business owner, I think you have to choose your battles. Mm-hmm. Have I worked that hard today? No. Have I watched 3 back-to-back episodes of Top 10 Euro with Big Meats, Lineker and Shearer? Yes, I have. But I've had my meeting this morning. I've turned up for this, and I've got another team meeting at the end of the day. But I'm not going to be productive anywhere else, and I know that. So I think it's choosing when and where to fight your battles, and I think that's it. It was quite interesting. I've made a connection recently up at the university. Cecile Emery, great, really interesting professor around leadership and other bits and pieces, and she was doing some work around the negative impact of the martyr, the trooper. The person that's just like, well, I'm going to come in because I'm going to show, I have a strong work ethic, because, that can lead to negativity. you know, you can make mistakes. You know, you've got the potential, if you're back in the office, of sharing your jokes with your colleagues and your co-workers. And actually, you're probably not going to get better any quicker by just, you know, pushing through. You know, get some Lemsip, you know, go to bed for a few hours, you know, have a bit of R&R time. So, you know, hopefully you can get back on board quicker. So it's a really interesting one to navigate. And I think as a business owner, we don't always have to show that kind of strength and leadership from the front. We can, you know, I think we've spoken about this before, be vulnerable as well, take time off if we're feeling under the weather.
It's a really interesting point. Let's just dwell on that for a minute. So here's something to throw you, and I'd be interested to get your opinion on it. So context is, at Air, we introduced paid sick pay years ago. When I moved back to the UK from Australia, having worked all of my adult life in Australia, so my only ever employment history being there, I was absolutely flabbergasted to learn that people can be off sick and not get paid, because people have got mortgages to pay and bills to pay, and you know, you want income being flatline, not lumpy, and surely it's expected that people get ill occasionally. So we introduced a policy of a number of days sick pay per year. But in order to have that sick pay, you have to qualify, right? So there are a few things. So if somebody's always sick on a Monday, you know, and we know they had a big weekend, or always pulled Fridays or whatever, there's certain things that would maybe mean there's a conversation rather than an automatic. But as a general rule, we want people to be protected. The reason I brought that in, again, come back to my experience in Australia, is I knew nothing different. Because in Australia, I don't know what it is now. When I was there, I believe it was 9 days sick a year. And that's a statutory government requirement. So when you employ somebody, you factor that in. But and I like, to some degree, that. The downside, though, which I always laughed at, and as somebody who ran a team, used to frustrate the hell out of me, people would see that sick leave like holiday. So get to the end of the fiscal year, and they go, oh, I've got 4 days sick leave left. I'm going to use that. And openly talk about it like it was annual leave entitlement. Is there to cover. So how do you get the balance right? Because you don't want people to go, I can't be sick because I can't afford to be sick, because you can see where you end up with that trooper mentality. But you also don't want people to take the piss, right?
Yeah, I think it's interesting you say that, because I think, again, region to region, Australia, UK, Europe, North America, very different in terms of how we approach not just sick days, but general vacation. Yeah. You know, I've been working, say, with a group of US graduate students, and one of the supporting members of staff that was there, you know, she's been in a new role for the last couple of years in logistics. 5 days holiday
a year.
Yeah. I think it was for the first couple of years, then it goes up to like 6 or 7. 5 days. So, you know, they look at our system over here in terms of, well, I think most of ours are on 27, maybe 26, 27.
28. It's 28 statutory, isn't it? So it's 20 plus the 8 bank holidays.
Yeah. So I think actually we give the bank holidays on top of that as well.
We do.
But it's insane. So I think, you know, it's all perspective. You know, if you go to work in the US, you ain't getting very much at all.
No.
And I think it's also the size of the business, because I think both Corkscrew, Next Gen, and the Generator, we're small teams. You know, so I think we can take things on a case-by-case basis. I think the majority of time we will pay sick leave, because we know most people, we believe, want to be at work, and they're not pulling a fast one. It's not like on a Monday morning, you know, a big weekend of England winning the Euros, God forbid. But as soon as you get bigger, it becomes far, far harder. And I was speaking to Andrea in Barcelona about this as well. It's like, well, do we start having to enforce like things like doctor's notes? Because this is another thing. Like, when was the last time you asked for a doctor's note? I'm sure back in the day that was a big thing. But is it still a big thing?
I think it is. So it is within certain profiles of employees. So for me, you know, the makeup of Air is that the head of the departments report into me. So as a general rule, those are people who are wholly committed to their career. They're paid well. They manage a team. They've proven themselves over many years to be successful at what they do. But I think within a more junior team, within an entry-level sales capacity, for example, that is where you are more likely to get the behavior that suggests that they're maybe not that way inclined, where they don't have the same affinity with their job. They're not as driven by their career, or they haven't got to the stage where, you know, there's a certain level of expected behavior. So that's where you are still educating people on the difference between right and wrong in a working career. And you do have people that maybe are less likely to be stable, have family and have that kind of life, and they're more likely to be 23 and single and be out wanting to do things last minute, and then they make poor decisions from a work perspective. So I think it still exists in certain capacities in certain sorts of teams.
Do you ask for it?
I don't. I think our HR team do with certain people.
Do they?
On certain occasions, yeah. I believe so.
I don't know how you go around that. Like, I can't get a doctor's appointment for like a month.
No.
How's that like? It's like,
well, what's it worth, right? What's it worth? Because I could phone my doctor now, they wouldn't see me, but I could say I need a doctor's note because I've had a day off sick, and they would write me a doctor's note. That's the reality. So it's a tick box exercise, but it does, you know, I guess it's like anything. Is it a preventative mechanism? So if I look at our leadership team, our absenteeism is next to nothing, right? It's next to nothing. People get sick. Yeah, that's it. Within our sales force, that absenteeism is much harder. Now, you could arguably say there's less flexibility. They've got to sit on a phone all day. They've got to be talking to people all day. That's a harder thing to do. Whereas, like you have today, you wouldn't be a tick in a box as absent, but you've maybe not been as present as you would otherwise be. So it's perhaps less black and white as well. But I guess these things are in place as much to try to prevent and encourage the right behavior as they are. You can't catch it because people can get a letter if they want a letter, right?
Yeah. 2 questions. So one is, you don't have a similar scenario as Australia where you would give people a certain amount of sick days here? Because I remember, again, not in Australia, but a contact, I think it was Trinidad and Tobago or something, and they get, you know, 2 sick days a month or something that they can use, and you're expected to use because it encompasses a lot of other things rather than just, you know, your physical health. It might be a day off for your mental health. So, you know, should people take sick leave for those kind of things? And is it, you know, as an organization, should we be offering that alongside holiday? Should holiday just incorporate that? Well, if you're not feeling that great, you know, we give you enough holiday compared to someone like the US. So would you build that into air?
It's a really interesting question, and not one that I've been asked in that way. And I think even you saying that makes me think of ideas. So we have 5 paid sick days a year, up to 5 paid sick days, but they have to qualify it. So not that they have to qualify, they can disqualify themselves by doing the wrong thing consistently. And I think those kick in after probation or something like that. So there's some basic things in there that just mean that we're not getting people come in and start and join us. I think there's a couple of questions in what you said there. Question one is, could you build that in? Like, could they have a pod of 30 days, 35 days a year that they use for whatever, right? And they could use it for sick or annual leave. And I think it's a really interesting question and one that I think is worth discussion. Second is what quantifies as sick? Is it physically sick? Is it mentally sick? I don't think, look, my take is it's whatever you quantify as sick. So if you can't feel work ready for whatever reason, that could be depression. That could be you've got what I would describe in your case as man flu, or it could be that you've injured your leg and you're in a lot of pain, right? Those are all very different things, but they're all as valid as the other. I think what we're trying to do is get people to be able to make a more mature decision around whether they are best to work or not work. I'll add one last bit of commentary, which is that I've always been frustrated by our business model. So when I look at our leadership team, we don't bill their time to clients. And this is one of the downsides of certain sectors, but our leadership team are there to achieve an outcome. And just like they might be able to have the flexibility like you have today, I don't feel great, I'm going to dip into a few things, give myself a little bit of an extra break. And then they might, arguably, and nobody's asked them to, they might pick up the laptop on a Friday evening and go, I've got a few bits I want to catch up with. And that's almost like a trade-off, isn't it? It kind of works like that. When you are delivering a service that has to be delivered between 8 o'clock in the morning and 5 o'clock at night, or 8:30 and 5:30, 6 o'clock, whatever it is, and that time is being billed, everyone you lose. And that's always been one of the hard things with our operational team, has been, you know, when that person isn't there, we're paying for the cost of it, but not having any income against it. So we can do that to a degree because you build in what we call shrinkage. We build in a percentage of time that we're going to be paying someone that that we're not getting paid for, and that's part of your business model. But if you were to give freedom around that, to what degree does that then impact on the business model, and then what degree does that have on everybody in the business? So there's always things that I think depends on the angle you're coming at it from when it comes to this topic.
Yeah, it's quite difficult, and there was something that we won't unpack today because I think it's a much bigger thing. It's that idea of someone catching up on a Friday night. They want to get on top of things. And that more, I guess, flexible work. Because when people talk about flexible work, often they think, well, it's either at the office or it's at home. But I think it goes far wider than that in terms of you work when you're most productive. Yeah. You work in times that suit, your schedule and how you manage that as a business owner to ensure that you're sure the staff that you're paying for are being productive, and as well as giving them the flexibility to be as productive as they can in their work week. But again, I think that's maybe a whole nother topic.
Well, it isn't. It's a value exchange, isn't it? Because when you think about it, let's break it down to the bare bones. What you want as an employee is to be looked after, right? Feel safe, secure, valued, and to be fairly remunerated. Right? That's why we all go to work in the first place. If we're an employee, we go because we have to be remunerated to pay our bills, to live, to feed our family, all the rest of it. And what we want as employers, if you run a business or you're a team lead or you manage people, is to have a fair value exchange. That out of my £40,000 investment, and remember, and a lot of employees forget this, you might be on £40,000 a year or £25,000 a year or £80,000 a year, but you can add 15 to 20% of that in terms of what it's costing the company. And I think people forget that for every pound I pay you, I've got to go and pay about 9% to the government on top of that. People forget about that entirely. We want that value exchange to be fair. So if it's costing me £50,000 total to have you there, I got to know that regardless of how hard you work, how nice you are, that there's a value that comes off the back of that. And if somebody is sick, flexible, at home, in the office, but the value is clearly there, it doesn't matter so much. It's only when that value starts to diminish does there become an issue. And that's where sickness on a day where there's not much going on is one thing. Sickness on a day where your biggest client is coming down flying over from Paris to meet you face to face. What would you do in that situation? And that's where it's like, actually, there's always a different perspective on each one.
Okay, quick. I'm going to add another question and get back to the second one previously. Job stacking. Have you heard about this?
No.
So this was, I think it was a trend. No. Kind of COVID, when people started working remotely, they had their jobs. Well, I'm not in the office. Boss doesn't necessarily know what I'm doing, as long as I'm, hitting the expectations of my employer. I can just feed on a couple of other jobs. I can do another job elsewhere. And I didn't get to the bottom of it because I assume that only works in a freelancing scenario. Any lawyers, legal professions out there, please let me know. Because if you're employed by one organization, they're paying your tax. It's going through the PAYE. So I don't know how you can get another full-time job on top of that. So I'm sure it's maybe you've got one full-time job, but then you're getting freelancing gigs on top of it as well. My personal opinion is I don't like it. Because I think the thing is, and I've spoken to people, some of the team about this, and, we had a very open conversation. And I think from my side, there was always that, well, it's not impacting, the work I'm doing for you. It's like, but I'm paying you ultimately full-time. I'm paying you full-time for a full-time position. And there will be times that your mind is taken elsewhere. It's thinking about another piece of work, or there's a call that maybe you have to take because you can't get off. There will be impact. And I think my thing was, I don't mind it as long as you're willing to go freelance. Take away all the employer benefits. I will take you on as a contractor, and then that's fine. I don't have an issue because actually it's on project based. But if I'm employing someone, having them work on other projects and other things, I think for me can be like, it can blur lines. I
don't disagree. I think there's probably two bits of commentary I'd add. One is, if you are still achieving the expectations based on let's say you're spending 70% of your time doing it and 30% doing this other job, I would argue, well, actually, what more could you be doing if you put that 30% into this? So it's one thing to hit expectations, but geez, we could be all creating opportunities. And I think you're letting your team down by not being the best you can be. And I think we have a responsibility to bring the best version of ourselves that we can. That won't be every day because it's impossible, or every hour or every meeting we'll get things right and wrong. But if I can achieve what's expected on 70%, you imagine in any elite professional sporting environment or political environment or in the army, if they went, we're in this battle, we're doing really well, it's going to go and take a break because we're doing really well at them. Like, that's not how people are successful. That's not a catalyst of success. So there's that. And then there's, the more black and white statutory legal piece, which is that, as I understand it, within employment contracts, you as a full-time employer have a right to know about or can build into your contracts legally the right to know about and understand and have to give permission around other jobs. And and I've seen it in the past where people I know have stood in the way of people going to do that, even if that's them maybe building their own, it's called side hustles, their own small business on the side. And I think has a limit. I'm not in agreement with that. I think you should give people the freedom to do what they want outside of work, and if they're learning new skills and developing and challenging themselves, brilliant. But I think the moment it gets in the four walls in the way of work, regardless of what they're achieving now, because that can change over time, that other job can become more demanding. Your job need more.
And just to caveat that, because before people start saying, well, you've got the gig economy, and I get the gig economy, but if you've got a full-time job, those kind of part-time elements, I don't think such an issue. But what we're talking about in the job stack in here are full-time jobs.
Yeah.
That you are doing full-time jobs, not just one, but two or three. And I think that's more my issue, because if someone wants to go and earn a bit more cash in the evening or at the weekend because the hours are shorter, I get that. Or a side hustle, that into their kind of week. That's great. But it's when you commit to another full-time job or a couple of full-time jobs. I don't understand how anyone could do.
It doesn't really it's not the best. You're not doing the right thing, right? The bottom line is, as humans, we know the difference between right and wrong, and that's not the right thing to do, because you can't do either of those. And not just about if you're working for you or me, it's the other person. They're not getting the best version of it, and they're paying them full time as well. And I'd even go as far as to say, I've seen people try to come in and work in our sales team before, and then go to a bar and work in the evening till late and come in, and have struggled to be able to do that. And they're not crossing over, but they just become so tired and so burnt out because they just have no time to relax. And then they end up being sick and absenteeism, and you're under performance management anyway. So look, I think it's, you can't be a jack of all trades and be hugely successful. I get there's pressure on earnings, there's pressure on cost of living. And I think the way to do that is to have a conversation with the employer and say, I've got a challenge. I've got 2 or 3 ideas around how I could solve that. Is there a way that we can help? Is there one of these things you'd be happy for me to go and explore? And maybe there's an opportunity to do more work, to do some overtime within your environment. Maybe there's an opportunity to say, well, yeah, we're really happy for you to go and do this. Just watch capacity for yourself and make sure that you're comfortable with it, rather than kind of going around the back door and doing it the dodgy way, which just feels unethical.
And it comes back round to that kind of sick leave. And if you're burnt out, if you do other things, it becomes difficult, especially if you're the employer that's covering the sick day leaves, those holidays and everything else in the other company. It's getting away scot-free. So let's go back to the other question, going back to sickness. If someone turns up to air and you can tell they're under the weather, they're not feeling great, would you enforce that they go home?
I would. It depends on what you do, how you define under the weather. But I think if someone was clearly,
you'd see me and you'd be like, "Come on now,
no, you look lovely."
Man up.
Exactly, man up. Yeah, I love that one. No, I think if it's cold, right? So if you've got a cold, a common cold, and you feel a bit rough, I think that's on you. I'd probably say, "You're right. Are you feeling okay to be here?" I'd actually probably say to them, "Are you sure you want to be in the office? Because you could be working from home, and then you put your feet up on the sofa, you take it a bit easier, Lemsip tissues, all the rest of it, and you do it in your pajamas, and at least you're resting to some degree, even if you're still engaging in work. Your body is resting, and you're not handing it off to other people. But if somebody was visibly unwell, to the point where you can see they are suffering. Yeah, I think, and I don't think that's a new thing. I think I've always been inclined to say, go home. Because you do get those people who don't want to be the ones, and I respect them, the fact that they'll bring themselves in the office because they don't want to be the ones to call in. They don't want to call in sick. They don't want to let the team down. And as a leader, I think you become a better leader and you help them to be a better person. Saying, hey, I admire you for making the effort to come in. Good on you. Really happy you did that. But you shouldn't be here. Go home. I'm giving you permission. And they almost need that permission. They always need to be told that it's okay. So yeah, I think get them out at that point. Give them get rid of the guilt.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one as well, because there's no hard and fast rules. I think we spoke about this again before, about how you're dealing with individuals. We all have different expectations of what it means to be sick or how ill we are. Also, the levels of sickness, obviously.
Yeah.
And I think, I remember, it was a nightmare when I was sick for school because, my parents, not only was I not allowed to go to school, well, that was my choice. I don't feel well enough to go to school. Couldn't leave the bedroom. There was no TV. There was no going out. You missed everything. It was so boring. So it's like, I'm just going to go to school anyway because I want to hang out with my mates.
Was it still in black and white in those days as well?
It was still in black and white. It was a flower pot then, Bill and Ted, Muffin the Mule, all those good things. Great TV back then. Can't decide what to watch these days. So I think it's kind of been instilled in me in this mindset. You just get on with it, And I think a lot of the stuff that I'd done previously, the underpinning, pouring concrete, if you don't turn up, you're letting your mate down.
Yeah.
They've got to shovel pour a load of concrete. So you go, you turn up, you do as much as you can. I think not the same kind of thing maybe now that I'm in, that we can have a few days off, we can take the load. It can like, people understand that you're sick. So again, it's going back to fighting those battles, thinking about what do I need to turn up for and what can I get?
Nobody's ever achieved anything without a bit of pain and commitment, right? So I do like that the starting mentality of I'm going to be there unless I really can't be there. I think is a really nice place to start and a good place to start if you want to have the foundations of being a good professional, being successful at everything that you do. Go back to my running, or if you're a footballer or whatever. You can't look at these guys who are hugely successful and think, every time they got a sniffle, they just took the day off. They didn't, right? They trained through it to some degree, but there's a tipping point. And that tipping point is your tipping point, right? It's different for every person, where you realize it is better for you short, medium, and long term to not do something than it is to do it. And that's that. I think you just have to make that judgment. And I think it's something we learn over time as well, that, we don't, when you're 23 and you're trying to get somewhere in your career and you're trying to prove to people, you are far more likely to be successful if you do get your head down and just get in there at every opportunity, unless you absolutely can't, because people will go, I respect that. And, I think, you will be there to be successful. But if you're going to go in and have a negative impact, to your point earlier, don't do it, because that's going to be detrimental. So we just got to be mature enough in our decision making, I think.
Another question for you. What's your ratio to male to female in the office?
Do you know, I couldn't tell you right now. It's fluctuated a lot over the years, and it's a data point that I've looked at a bit, but and more so when I see an obvious trend. So there was a period of time, I think, when we were much, much smaller, we had about 30 people, and I had about 24 guys and six females, and it was like, not comfortable with this, and vice versa at other times. And even our senior leadership team, so up until last August, September time, we, on our SLT, I think we had 10 or 11, and 7 were female and 4 were male. But that's flipped. We've had a couple of new hires over the last 12 months that are male, and we've had a couple of leavers that are female, and all of a sudden it's more of a like 60-40 male. So I think the business as a whole is somewhere between 60-40, 40-60. I couldn't tell you where, but it's reasonably central.
The only reason I ask is obviously like for the female proportion of the menstrual cycle, and building that into sick leave as well. Because it is different. It's massively different. Is that a policy that Air have? Is it something you've looked at?
I don't think we have a specific. Do you know what? I think we do have something that's being developed right now. I think HR were talking about this, and I know there's been a big thing around the menopause and policies around that as well at the moment. So I do think this. We're trying to make the workplace more accommodating for everyone, right? And that includes That includes people from different backgrounds, people from different faiths. We had somebody join the business recently who, I learned something because when she joined the business, I went to shake her hand, but she's Muslim and doesn't make physical contact with men. And all of a sudden, like, oh, I learned something. Isn't that brilliant? And the workplace has to adapt, where we might go out on a social, but we can't necessarily just go to the pub all the time because she can't go to the pub or doesn't want to go to the pub. So I think it is important that we accommodate these things. And I think that's where we have to be sensible, where if you're going to categorize sick, we call it sick, right? But it doesn't have to be sick. You don't have to be physically sick. It can be mental. It can be physical. It can be a mixture of those two things. It can be exhaustion, right? There's an argument to say, and I've been through this with 3 young kids, there are days when the kids were really young where I went to work and I was zombified because I was off the back of 3 or 4 nights of just no sleep. I would have been a better person for the next 2 weeks if I could have just had a 5-hour sleep that day, catch up a bit and get back to a little bit more of a normal setting.
I think this is an interesting point because it's like you're saying, it's not just about a female split. Because people might have families or they might have existing conditions. And is it the fact that the traditional HR blanket policy for sick days is somewhat outdated? Does it become far more individualistic, where there's more of an open conversation between employer and employee? But you I don't know, maybe I would always be quite, I think if I was a staff member, I would hope that I would understand the reasons that maybe someone had more paid sick leave than myself. But I don't know. I don't know if that builds tension and unfairness. I don't know what the legalities are.
HR's there to keep everyone equal.
For another, then what does that look like? But it feels.
You're damned if you do, and you're damned if you don't. That's the challenge.
But again, this is why these conversations have to be had to try and find a solution. But there's always. I think you have to understand. There's always going to be those people that take when the opportunity's there. You would hope that you employ the right people, that's very much in the minority, that we can accommodate those people that don't necessarily want to take those days off through whatever, but just realistically have to. But as you said, then not punish them by not paying them so they can't cover their mortgage or cover their overheads. It's
perhaps you kind of touched on this earlier, and I don't know if it was an idea you were kind of hinting towards, or we've ended up just landing on this idea of saying, well, okay, there's 28 days, there's 28 days statutory, right? 20 days of annual leave you have to give somebody legally if they're working full time in the UK, and there are 8 bank holidays, and equally you have to pay them for those. So you've got 28 days, and regardless of whether they're bank holidays or not, I think people forget the fact that we're not. The employer isn't getting any productivity out of those days. They're not getting any work, and we're paying. So they're 28 days statutory annual leave, however you frame it. If you were to say to people, right, you can have 35 days or whatever the number is, or 40 days a year, depending on your makeup and employer, what you use them for is up to you, right? So you can, because actually sick leave, why not categorize it as annual leave? I've got an annual leave allowance. It's leave, right? It doesn't matter if it's last minute leave that I need because something's happened, because that might not be sickness, that might be family sickness, it might be whatever, or planned holiday. I've got an allowance that allows for whatever it is, whatever I choose to take that time off. When someone books holiday, I don't say, well, where are you going and why? That's their decision. Let them have the time and let them plan for it. Maybe we remove the need for employees to have to be accountable on the why, and they make that decision up to a certain point. And maybe you just group that together as a really clean way. So then somebody who is likely to be more sick, their health, maybe they don't take as many holidays, but they're using that time to get better, and is weighted towards that. And other people that don't use those got more time for holidays, fine. But that's the trade-off.
Yeah, I think it's, you then start looking at was it Netflix? Netflix had the model where you had as much holiday as you wanted, or as much time off as you wanted.
Yeah.
But they were under the belief that actually people genuinely don't take those holidays. And I don't know how successful it is. I don't know if they're still doing it or not.
So that was, as I understand, where that model has worked really well is in high profit businesses, right? So they can pay people exceptionally well. They've got big margins. They're billions and billions of pounds. They want to attract the absolute best people, and they know that those people will therefore, on average, be more likely to be people who don't take the piss. That's not our business model, right? As a small business, every penny counts. And I know somebody who did that with a small business and said it was the worst business decision they ever made, which was fascinating. It nearly broke them and they ended up having to reverse it because the profile.
That's difficult to reverse when you give something like that.
Yeah,
you clear it back, because I've heard similar on the 4-day week. Implemented it, and they're like, "Oh,
I know." And
you can't do it now. You can't do it.
Yeah, no, you can't. How can you change something so ginormous? And look at it. These things are lovely as statements, and they get you a short-term win in a small business because people get on side, but people are fickle. That loyalty only lasts for a short period of time, and then it becomes normal. And then all of a sudden it's an entitlement. And this is where the balance is so important. So I would never consider an unlimited leave policy. If I employed only people who had proven over several years that they are hugely successful, they're massively ambitious, they always give a different story, but you've always got new people in your business who won't necessarily fit into that. And I think having some boundaries wherever they are, and you can flex those boundaries, you can find ways to be more generous if that's who you are as an employer, but you need boundaries.
Would you do a 4-day week?
No,
I wouldn't.
You
wouldn't be able to.
Business model, again, we would lose 20% of our income. Yeah. So, and this is where, you hear people's opinions on it, and it's always from where they sit. Lovely in certain sectors, in certain industries, but if the world became a 4-day, we would have to put the cost of our services up, or we'd have to reduce people's salaries by 20% in order to make our business model work. Yeah. And we are not a high profit business, and it would make it impossible for us to do business on the current model. So something would have to give somewhere. So we offer 4-day weeks. We have people who work 4 days. They're prorated on salary because we're prorated on income for what they do, and that's the model. So yes to 4 days, not at the cost of 5 days towards business.
I think it comes back to that flexibility and a question here. A question here, because holidays are great, but a lot of the time, like especially at the generator, they have to be planned months in advance. We can't have 2 people off at the same time, blah, blah. So, you have to request your holidays, and we make sure no one's off, and we're pretty flexible. We can normally get it done. But there's also that sort of thing, like in certain jobs, let's say, I don't know, you're into your surfing and it's pumping on a Thursday, and you see it on a Wednesday night, you've looked at the forecast and you're like, wow. Would you give someone holiday, short notice? I'm off for a surf tomorrow. I need to go and get in the water.
If the business can accommodate it, yeah. If the business can accommodate. So again, go back to my example. If our biggest client is flying in from Paris tomorrow,
it's a no-go.
No, I would hope that person wouldn't ask that question in the first place, because they would be able to answer that themselves.
Yeah.
But if it's a normal day, if we're up to speed with projects, we've got a bit of time up our sleeve, why would I say no? You're going to use that annual leave. I want you to be happy. I want you to be engaged. I want you to see that as an employer we're being flexible. So yeah, I would. And it's the same when it comes to, I get people come to me and saying, just found out my kids have got this show they're doing at school on Thursday, or it's sports day and it wasn't in our calendar. Yeah. And I'm like, be an adult, make a decision. If that's what you want to take your time off for, but if 4 other people are going to it, maybe be a bit organized next time, and more organized next time. And, that's just, again, common sense from my perspective.
Last question.
You are on question mode today. What happened?
Last question.
Yeah.
I'm just looking at something here so I get the date right. On Monday, the 15th of July, are you going to clear your calendar so Air can celebrate the Euro win? Is it going to be a clear calendar?
I don't know, mate. Are you asking me if I think they're going to win, or are you asking me if they win, would I be clearing my calendar?
Well, clearly we're going to win. It's coming home. Right? Let's get that in there before everyone gets bored.
Yeah, I will definitely be celebrating to some degree. I better book my annual leave now, just in case.
Put your annual leave in now,
or I can pull a sickie. I don't mind either way.
The generator will be open but we will be celebrating. People come down to the generator, and depending on who we beat, we will do a flip that country. If we beat France, it's croissants all round. If it's Germany, we'll bring the sausage. If it's Denmark in the final, we'll get the Danish pastries in. That's what I'll do. I will throw a slap up breakfast from the opposing team. Just more of a sense of appreciation rather than gloating
for the role they played in helping us win.
Yeah, hopefully it's not Sweden in there. I don't know. I wouldn't want like
no, they didn't qualify this time, sadly.
Or Iceland. Yeah. Rena can bring some Finnish food, but I don't think they're there. So exactly. No, they're not. They went out to Wales. No, I can't remember.
No, don't worry. We know what you mean. Don't worry. Oh dear, classic. Well, Neil, as always, it's been fun. Do you know what? Some really interesting topics here. And I think it shows how hard this whole thing is, right? Navigating your way through. There isn't always a right answer, and people's viewpoints on things will always differ and change. But it ain't easy running your own business, and it's this sort of stuff that you can easily make a decision on without actually making a decision too. So you've got to be conscious about it on the way in. Thank you for your input. Thank you for your questions today as well. You've done a sound job on a low battery, and I appreciate you.
Well, that's why I wanted you to answer more, so I didn't have to speak. I'd have to keep blowing my nose. All right, cheers, buddy.
Go blow your nose. Take care.
Oh, bye.